This is the ZMAR Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch ZMAR.
A Mercer report recently showed as of July, I think it was published in June, but some of the publications expanded information from the Mercer report about CFOs in July of 2024. Shows that CFOs feel like they have a good understanding of healthcare costs, but they're mostly concerned about the unpredictability of the costs. The survey mentioned that about 72% overall that were surveyed, healthcare costs were less predictable than other company expenses. And we've been talking about that on the podcast for a long time now, where there are ways to get more predictable outcomes, but a lot of CFOs don't have control of it. But the industry is seeing more and more of this, that CFOs are starting to have a seat at the table when it comes to healthcare costs. So renewal meetings, mid-year reviews, and even if you're looking for second opinions, they're usually starting to be in the room. Brokers have been pushing this for years, but it's really hard because CFOs feel like their time is worth more than everybody else, and that's always been the case. I mean, a lot of people feel that way in general, but the problem is the CFO is the one that controls the expenses. They're the ones that know the functionality of money that comes in and out of a company, but yet they don't want to invest the time into it. Even when we're prospecting and we're trying to get the CFO in a room and they resist to give any time whatsoever. But even our current client base, I'm not speaking for everybody, but yeah, and other brokers would agree to this, that it's hard to get those people with the financial numbers in the room to understand any of this, because they're not going to learn overnight anyways. But if you give us 15 minutes each time we come by and visit or have a Teams or Zoom meeting, you'll pick up on things along the way. So even though majority of the people have an understanding of it, of the CFOs that were surveyed, but at the same time, they're not investing enough time to figure out a way to control the cost, make it more predictable. They use it as an excuse more than anything else. There's a good chance that they're paying 30% more than they should, but how do they even know, right? If there was a better idea, a better deal out there, and how would you even know? Because what if your legacy broker doesn't want to bring it up to you? There's so many reasons why, and I don't fault the broker at all, really, but he or she needs to have the conversation at some point. But they could be uncomfortable with new settings. Change is hard for most people. And then at the same time, it could be lack of information altogether, so they avoid it. The other thing could be is our industry, so the insurance brokerage industry is aging, and so the average age is, I don't know what it is today, but it's probably 60 something maybe, and they don't want to learn a new craft, right? They just want to coast until retirement. They don't want to disrupt the boat. They're afraid that they're going to bring up an idea, even if they're familiar with it, is now they're going to disrupt their client base, which could change their outcome on income and stability, whatever it might be. But, why wouldn't you want to at least hear these ideas? And the reality is, even for the first visit for a second opinion, even if you've been with a current broker for years, that meeting should not be more than 30 minutes in that first meeting. And so, but many times, the only reason it gets to 30 minutes is because of sidebar discussions. I know in our meetings, our meet and greets, we could get it in 10 to 15 minutes, and most brokers can. We cut to the chase, give you the concept of an idea, and see if we're on the same page. If you guys are on the same page, then the discussion continues, and you could always schedule another meeting. But the reality is the broker and the CFO and the HR and the owner and the partners all have to be on the same page with the idea. And so there's a friend of mine in the industry, he always calls it the meeting, do you believe what I believe, right? And so that's really it could take 5 minutes just saying, hey, this is a problem in the healthcare world. Here's some solution ideas to it. Does that make sense to you? Great. All right, let's schedule another meeting. So the CFO is really not investing a whole lot of time. It's just really the reality is the concept real enough to be on the same page? In business, we always want more control of the outcomes, right? It could be sales related expenses, employee base, executives, taxes, like all that. We want more control, right? But the many times is we cannot have the control in most cases, right? You don't have control of outputs, you don't have control of revenue, you don't, and that's one of the troubling things. Or if you're at sea, you're in the storm all the time, right? So you're learning on the fly, you're adapting because everything keeps changing, just like a storm would at sea. And so you would have to keep riding the roller coaster. That's why most entrepreneurs never make it or even start out, because there's too much of a roller coaster ride and there's so much unpredictability and you can't control the outcomes. And it usually, and 100% all the time, always takes more effort to get what you're looking for, and you're usually halfway there. Right? There was a quote I heard a long time ago that you need to work twice as hard to get half as much. And it's so true in business, unless you get some lucky streaks. But I tell you, the luck is only created by the activity that you put in. The people don't become successful just because one day you show up and you see it. There's a lot of pain and hard work that went into years before that ever occurred, or while it was occurring. Some people that achieve the success, they might actually say it's about time that they achieved it. In other cases, they might say, I'm not quite there yet. And even though in other people's perceptions, it's success. I'm going to take you down memory lane a little bit to the Battle of Midway. There's a lot of books and movies that are out there on a lot of things that occurred for the Battle of Midway. Many believe it was really the turning point of World War II. I mean, even talking about tragedies, even in business, right? But, the USS Yorktown had suffered a big hole in the flight deck because of a bomb, right? So now all of a sudden they're down a ship and they're trying to figure out how to win this battle. And the USS Yorktown was forced to go back for repairs, kind of like in business, we're always there trying to sharpen our tools. Intelligence missed the mark on the data for Pearl Harbor when Japan attacked them. And so it seems that was probably one of the biggest intelligent failures in history. And the Pearl Harbor loss was, and still is, one of the most talked about historic things that occurred and definitely in military and war history. I could recall moments that it was brought up in boot camp, along with other naval events such as the USS Forstall fire and some other things that were brought up, alliances in general, and then of course history books that always repeat this. They got several movies on Pearl Harbor. Obviously, it's a big history event, and we were surprised attack, but were we, right? And I'll get to that. But as the battle went on, the intelligence officer was getting readings that something was about to happen, but they couldn't put a finger on it. So when they were briefing Admiral Nimitz on it, they worded it as if there was like a wedding that was going to happen, and they knew something was going to happen. They kind of knew the date and the time. They had an idea what the location was, but there's no invitation for this. If you knew about it or heard about it, then you essentially were invited, at least in theory. There was clues that led to the Battle of Midway. They did not get an invitation for it. They just acted upon it. There was no rule book for this, and Nimitz just went based on assumption, especially after the loss of Pearl Harbor. So going on a whim, Admiral Nimitz tried to catch Japan by surprise. They pushed back at sea, air, and land, and obviously that was the pivotal point. The Battle of Midway is used in multiple situations for different outcomes, whether it's in business or if it's military or personal life. But a lot of things in war and battle can be translated to business. And with no endorsement at all, but Jocko Willink reads his leadership lessons out of combat books, and of course his own when he served in battle, because he was definitely in a wartime zone. One of the reasons that these war examples in combat are good in business, partly because of life or death, but also having success and failure. And so business can be a life or death situation, and businesses do die every day. And a cost of a benefits program could really kill a company instantly, just like, I guess, life from, a sniper or a bomb or at war, right? And so what CFOs and HR managers and owners and partners need to realize is that in order to get better outcomes, more predictable renewals, and more control and strategies to control those costs, you're not going to get a rule book on this, and you're not going to get an invitation to make it work. It's not going to be there. It'll be exactly like what the intelligence officer explained with the Battle of Midway, where they had information, they kind of knew where to go, they had input on where it was going to be, what the crossroads were going to be, and when they should be there, right? And some of it was just based on hunch and intuition, and other parts was based on data that they actually received. So in benefits, everybody's hearing about this party, like lower cost, bending the curve, but they're trying to do it the old way, and they feel like the old way is going to pull back those reins and control those costs. But the reality is that there's so much more information out there that takes them to a different direction, right? And that's where some of those intelligence at the Battle of Midway are leading into it, right? They knew what they had to risk. They had to put their ships and young men and putting their nation at great risk in the harm just to catch them off guard. And in benefits, that is the risk. The crossroads is going to be against the traditional one and having cost control measures with more predictable outcomes. And it could risk the relationship you have with your current broker or even future brokers, even if you've had those relationships over the last 20 years. Because there's hunches out there that lead you to better places, controlling costs. Literally, we just had a renewal, and of course, we're recording this in July of 2024, but we just had open enrollments for August 1st, and we were doing things outside the box for this renewal because of, sure, it was only a 10% increase. In my opinion, only 10, but some people say 10% is a lot, and it was a larger company, but we were pushing the envelope. We did some things that were a little bit more untraditional, something the company's never experienced before. We were the new broker, but we ended up saving this company at least $10,000 a month. And the employees are actually going to reverse some of their out-of-pocket expenses, and we eliminate the network. And so they go anywhere they want, see whoever they want, and there's no network restriction. They're going to process it as a PPO, and everything's going to be good for the employee. And some of that conversation was going against everything they ever knew about healthcare. It is the first step in the right direction. We're going to implement more as the years go on. It is a multi-year strategy to get out of what you were in. And so these are traditional method or non-traditional methods versus your traditional methods of renewal and benefit packaging and how things work when you're putting all these things together. So for those HR managers, CFOs, and partners and owners out there, you're not going to get an invitation to get this done. Your current broker is probably not even going to invite you to the table and talk about these non-traditional methods of control and cost. When I say non-traditional, it doesn't mean that they haven't been tried and trued, right? This is nothing new. And a lot of these strategies have been built upon by experts in the industry over the last 30 or 40 years. It's different today than 30 years ago. But again, just like everything else, everything's a work in progress. You can't start your company and make $100,000 when you're expecting to go to 10 million. But one day you might be looking back and you're at 100 million and thinking that, holy smokes, I thought 10 million was a good spot to be, and now you're higher. It's the same thing that's happened with benefits and control and costs and outcomes that come with it, that you'll have to work on this over a period of time, and then you're going to look back and say, holy smokes, I'm glad I made that hunch call, just like the turning point in the Battle of Midway.